He saw, with a touch of pity, that blood trickled from a sore in its left shoulder, matting the thick hair. It sniffed the fallen rifle. Then, lifting its head and shoulders again, it sniffed the air, this time with an audible sound that shook from Grimwood's mind the last possibility that he witnessed a vision or dreamed a dream. One moment it gazed into his face, its big brown eyes shining and unafraid, then turned abruptly and swung away at a speed ever rapidly increasing across the park-like spaces till it was lost, finally in the dark tangle of undergrowth beyond. And the Englishman's muscles turned to paper, his paralysis passed, his legs refused to support his weight, and he sank heavily to the ground. 3. It seems he slept long and heavily. He sat up, stretched himself, yawned and rubbed his eyes. The sun had moved across the sky, for the shadows he saw now ran from west to east, and there were long shadows. He had slept evidently for hours, and evening was drawing in. He was aware that he felt hungry. In his pouch-like pockets he had dried meat, sugar, matches, tea, and the little billy that never left him. He would make a fire, boil some tea, and eat. But he took no steps to carry out his purpose. He felt disinclined to move. He sat thinking. What was he thinking about? He did not know. He could not say exactly. It was more like fugitive pictures that passed across his mind. Who and where was he? This was the Valley of the Beasts, that he knew. He felt sure of nothing else. How long had he been here, and where had he come from, and why? The questions did not linger for their answers, almost as though his interest in them was merely automatic. He felt happy, peaceful, unafraid. He looked about him, and the spell of this virgin forest came upon him like a charm. Only the sound of falling water, the murmur of wind sighing among innumerable branches broke the enveloping silence. Overhead, beyond the crests of the towering trees, a cloudless evening sky was paling into transparent orange, opal, mother of pearl. He saw buzzards soaring lazily. A scarlet tanager flashed by. Soon would the owls begin to call, and the darkness fall like a sweet black veil and hide all detail, while the stars sparkled in their countless thousands. A glint of something that shone upon the ground caught his eye. A smooth, polished strip of rounded metal. His rifle. And he started to his feet impulsively, yet not knowing exactly what he meant to do. At the sight of the weapon, something had leaped to life in him, then faded out, died down, and was gone again. He began muttering to himself, but could not finish what he was about to say. His name had disappeared completely. "I'm in the Valley of the Beast," he repeated in place of what he sought but could not find. This fact, that he was in the Valley of the Beast, seemed the only positive island of knowledge that he had. About the name something known and familiar clung, though the sequence that had led up to it he could not trace. Presently, nevertheless, he rose to his feet, advanced a few steps, stooped, and picked up the shining metal thing, his rifle. He examined it a moment, a feeling of dread and loathing rising in him, a sensation of almost horror that made him tremble. Then, with a convulsive movement that betrayed an intense reaction of some sort he could not comprehend, he flung the thing far from him into the foaming torrent. He saw the splash it made. He also saw that same instant a large grizzly bear swing heavily along the bank not a dozen yards from where he stood. It too heard the splash, for it started, ruined, paused a second, then changed its direction and came toward him. It came up close. Its fur brushed his body. It examined him leisurely, as the moose had done, sniffed, half rose upon its terrible hind legs, opened its mouth so that red tongue and gleaming teeth were plainly visible, then flopped back upon all fours again with a deep growl that yet had no anger in it, and swung off at a quick trot back to the bank of the torrent. He had felt its hot breath upon his face, but he had felt no fear. The monster was puzzled, but not hostile. It disappeared. "They know not." He sought for the word man, but could not find it. "They have never been hunted." The words ran through his mind, if perhaps he was not entirely certain of their meaning. They rose, as it were, automatically. A familiar sound lay in them somewhere. At the same time, there rose feelings in him that were equally, though in another way, familiar and quite natural. Feelings he had once known intimately but long since laid aside. What were they? What was their origin? They seemed distant as the stars, yet were actually in his body, in his blood and nerves, part and parcel of his flesh. Long, long ago. Oh, how long, how long? Thinking was difficult. Feeling was what he most easily and naturally managed. He could not think for long. Feeling rose up and drowned the effort quickly. That huge and awful bear. Not a nerve, not a muscle quivered in him as its acrid smell rose to his nostrils. Its fur brushed down his legs. Yet he was aware that somewhere there was danger, though not here. Somewhere there was attack, hostility, wicked and calculated plans against him, as against that splendid roaming animal that had sniffed, examined, then gone its own way satisfied. Yes, active attack, hostility and careful, cruel plans against his safety, but not here. Here he was safe, secure, a peace. Here he was happy. Here he could roam at will, no eye cast sideways into forest depths, no ear pricked high to catch sounds not explained, no nostrils quivering to scent alarm. He felt this, but he did not think it. He felt hungry, thirsty too. Something prompted him now at last to act. His billy lay at his feet, and he picked it up. The matches, he carried them in a metal case whose screw top kept out all moisture, were in his hand. Gathering a few dry twigs, he stooped to light them, then suddenly drew back with the first touch of fear he had yet known. Fire! What was fire? The idea was repugnant to him. It was impossible. He was afraid of fire. He flung the metal case after the rifle and saw it gleam in the last rays of sunset, then sink with a little splash beneath the water. Glancing down at his billy, he realized next that he could not make use of it either, nor of the dark, dry, dusty stuff he had meant to boil in water. He felt no repugnance, certainly no fear in connection with these things, only he could not handle them. He did not need them. He had forgotten, yes, forgotten what they meant exactly. This strange forgetfulness was increasing in him rapidly, becoming more and more complete with every minute, yet his thirst must be quenched. The next moment he found himself at the water's edge. He stooped to fill his billy, paused, hesitated, examined the rushing water, then abruptly moved a few feet higher up the stream, leaving the metal can behind him. His handling of it had been oddly clumsy, his gestures awkward, even unnatural. He now flung himself down with an easy, simple motion of his entire body, lowered his face to a quiet pool he had found, and drank his fill of the cool, refreshing liquid. But though unaware of the fact, he did not drink. He lapped. Then, crouching where he was, he ate the meat and sugar from his pockets, lapped more water, moved back a short distance again into the dry ground beneath the trees, but moved this time without rising to his feet, curled his body into a comfortable position and closed his eyes again to sleep. No single question now raised its head to him. He felt contentment, satisfaction only. He stirred, shook himself open half an eye, and saw, as he had felt already in slumber, that he was not alone. In the park-like spaces in front of him, as in the shadowed fringe of the trees at his back, there was sound and movement, the sound of stealthy feet, the movement of innumerable dark bodies. There was the pad and tread of animals, the stir of backs of smooth and shaggy beasts in countless numbers. Upon this host fell the light of a half-moon sailing high in a cloudless sky, the gleam of stars sparkling in the clear night air like diamonds, shone reflected in hundreds of ever-shifting eyes, most of them but a few feet above the ground. The whole valley was alive. He sat upon his haunches, staring, but staring in wonder, not in fear, though the foremost of the great host were so near that he could have stretched an arm and touched them. It was an ever-moving, ever-shifting throng he gazed at, spellbound in the pale light of moon and stars, now fading slowly towards the approaching dawn. And the smell of the forest itself was not sweeter to him in that moment than the mingled perfume, raw, pungent, acrid, of this furry host of beautiful wild animals that moved like a sea, with a strange murmuring too like sea, as the myriad feet and bodies passed to and fro together. Nor was the gleam of the starry phosphorescent eyes less pleasantly friendly than those happy lamps that light home-lost wanderers to cozy rooms and safety. Through the wild army, in a word, poured to him the deep comfort of the entire valley, a comfort which held both the sweetness of invitation and the welcome of some magical homecoming. No thoughts came to him, but feeling rose in a tide of wonder and acceptance. He was in his rightful place. His nature had come home. There was this dim, vague consciousness in him that after long, futile straying in another place where uncongenial conditions had forced him to be unnatural and therefore terrible, he had returned at last where he belonged. Here, in the valley of the beast, he had found peace, security, and happiness. He was at last himself. It was a marvelous, even a magical scene he watched, his nerves at highest tension yet quite steady, his senses exquisitely alert, yet no uneasiness in the full, accurate reports they furnished. Strong as some deep flood tide, yet dim, as with untold time and distance rose over him the spell of long-forgotten memory of a state where he was content and happy, where he was natural. The outlines, as it were, of mighty primitive pictures flashed before him, yet were gone again before the detail was filled in. He watched the great army of the animals. They were all about him now. He crouched upon his haunches in the center of an ever-moving circle of wild forest life. Great timber wolves he saw pass to and fro, loping past him with long stride and graceful swing, their red tongues lolling out. They swarmed in hundreds. Behind, yet mingling freely with them, rolled the huge grizzlies, not clumsy as their uncouth bodies promised, but swiftly, lightly, easily, their half-tumbling gait masking agility and speed. They gamboled, sometimes they rose and stood half upright. They were comely in their mass and power. They rolled past him so close that he could touch them. And the black bear and the brown went with them, bears beyond counting, monsters and little ones, a splendid multitude. Beyond them, yet only a little farther back, where the park-like spaces made free movement easier, rose a sea of horns and antlers like a miniature forest in the silvery moonlight. The immense tribe of deer gathered in vast throngs beneath the starlit sky. Moose and caribou he saw.